She bore the billionaire's heir, never knowing he would choose love over legacy. She never planned to love him, and he never planned to choose her. But the night their worlds collided, a child was conceived who would one day force a billionaire to decide what mattered more: legacy written in blood, or love written in scars. Welcome to Echoes of a Touching Tale, a place where fictional stories come alive through emotion, imagination, and unforgettable moments. Every video is crafted to touch the heart, spark the mind, and leave echoes that stay with you long after the story ends. If you enjoy meaningful tales, gentle twists, and stories that truly make you feel, subscribe to the channel and join us for more captivating stories every time a new video is released. The rain had started again, the stubborn, soaking kind that blurred the city into streaks of gray and regret. Amara Vale stood under the leaking awning of a closed tailoring shop, clutching a thin folder to her chest like it could stop her hands from shaking. Inside the folder were rejection letters. 3 of them. Printed. Polite. Brutal. She hadn't cried yet. Amara had learned, long ago, to ration her tears. They were expensive. You never knew when you'd really need them. The bus was late. It was always late when she was tired. She shifted her weight, rubbing her lower back without thinking, the way she had begun to do recently. There was a dull ache there now. Constant, unfamiliar. Her body felt different. Heavy in a way she couldn't name yet. She blamed the long hours, the skipped meals, the stress of trying to survive a city that rewarded pedigree more than grit. A woman passed by, laughing into her phone. A man splashed through a puddle without caring who he soaked. Life moved on, indifferent. Amara exhaled slowly and looked up at the skyline. Glass towers pierced the clouds like they owned the sky itself. Somewhere up there, decisions were made that changed lives. Somewhere up there, people never worried about bus schedules. She had grown up believing hard work was enough. That belief had cracked quietly over the years, no dramatic shatter, just a series of disappointments that left hairline fractures in her optimism. Still, she showed up. Every day. That was her rebellion. The bus finally groaned to a stop. She climbed in, paid her fare, and took a seat by the window. As the city slid past, her reflection stared back at her. Dark eyes, pulled back curls, lips pressed together like she was holding something in. "You're okay," she whispered to herself. "You're always okay." But her hand drifted, unconsciously, to her abdomen. Somewhere deep inside her, something had already begun to change everything. Have you ever had a season where you were doing everything right, yet nothing seemed to work? Share your thoughts in the comments. On the 47th floor of the Cross Global headquarters, Julian Cross signed his name without looking. Another deal. Another acquisition. Another victory no one clapped for. The boardroom smelled faintly of espresso and polished wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a private painting. Julian stood at the head of the table, tall, immaculate, untouchable. His suit fit him like armor, custom-tailored, flawless, expensive enough to feed a family for months. "Congratulations, Julian," one of the board members said, already gathering his papers. "Your father would have approved." That sentence landed heavier than intended. Julian's jaw tightened for half a second, barely noticeable unless you knew him well. Which none of them did. "My father approved of results," Julian replied coolly. "Not congratulations." Polite laughter followed. He offered a thin smile, the kind he had perfected over years of boardrooms and expectations. When the room emptied, silence rushed in. Julian turned back to the window. Down below, the city pulsed with life, chaotic, loud, human. So far removed from the quiet, sterile world he inhabited. His phone buzzed. "Father" flashed on the screen. He didn't answer immediately. Julian had been groomed for this life since childhood. The only son. The heir. The continuation of a name that opened doors before you even knocked. His future had been mapped out long before he'd understood the cost. Marriage negotiations disguised as introductions. Women evaluated like mergers. Legacy discussed like a living thing that needed protecting. Love had never been part of the equation. He finally answered. Yes, sir. Dinner tonight, his father said. Not a request. The Ashfords will be there. Of course they would. Julian closed his eyes briefly. I'll be there. The call ended. He stared at his reflection in the glass. Sharp features, composed expression, eyes that had learned not to ask for more. He had everything people envied, and nothing he could feel. That night, the city exhaled. A charity gala bloomed into existence on the riverfront. Lights, music, luxury spilling onto sidewalks where Amara Vale was just trying to get home. Her bus broke down 2 stops early. She sighed, stepped off into the night, and started walking. The heels she wore were a mistake, thrifted, pretty, cruel. She kicked them off halfway, carrying them as she passed the glowing venue she could never enter. Inside, Julian Cross adjusted his cufflinks, already bored. Outside, Amara paused, dizzy for no clear reason, the world tilting just slightly. She leaned against a stone pillar. Inside, Julian stepped away from a conversation that felt like a transaction. Outside, Amara's folder slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the pavement. Julian pushed open a side door for air. Amara bent to pick up her life. Their eyes met under the spill of golden light. Just for a second. Not knowing that in that second, something ancient and irreversible had begun. The music inside the gala pulsed like a living thing, controlled, elegant, distant. Outside, the city breathed differently. Louder. Messier. Real. Julian stepped fully into the night, loosening his tie as if the air itself had weight. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding himself until the cold brushed his face. For a brief, reckless moment, he imagined walking away. Just not going back in. That was when he saw her. She was crouched near the edge of the marble steps, barefoot now, hair falling loose from a once neat style. Papers lay scattered around her like fallen leaves. She looked up too fast, startled, as if caught doing something private. Sorry, she said quickly, already reaching for a page that skidded toward his polished shoe. Julian bent before he could stop himself. He picked up the paper, scanned it unintentionally. We regret to inform you. He didn't finish reading. Here, he said, handing it back. Their fingers brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, and strangely loud. Like a door slamming somewhere deep inside him. Thank you, she murmured. Her voice wasn't small, just careful. The kind of careful that came from learning not to take up space. You dropped more, he said, gesturing. They gathered the rest in silence. Up close, Julian noticed things he wasn't supposed to notice. The faint crease between her brows, the way she inhaled before standing, like the motion took effort. When she straightened, she swayed slightly. Are you all right? He asked. She nodded too quickly. Yeah. Just, long day. He believed her. And didn't. The doors behind him opened briefly, laughter spilling out. The contrast was sharp. Gold light versus street light. Silk versus pavement. You're with them, she said, following his glance. Not accusing. Observant. Yes, Julian replied. Figures. There was something in her tone, not bitterness, just acceptance. Like she'd already made peace with the fact that worlds like his didn't bend. I should go, she said, tucking the papers back into the folder. She slipped her shoes on despite the obvious discomfort. Julian hesitated. He didn't usually hesitate. Can I? He stopped. Reset. Can I walk you somewhere? At least to the next stop. She studied him then. Really studied him. The expensive suit. The controlled posture. The eyes that looked like they'd learned restraint the hard way. I'm not looking for charity, she said gently. I know, he replied. Neither am I. That surprised them both. After a beat, she nodded. Fine. 1 block. They walked side by side, the space between them charged with unspoken things. Traffic hummed. Somewhere, a siren wailed. My name's Julian. Amara. He liked how it sounded. Like warmth. 1 block, she reminded him, as if afraid he'd forget. Of course. They reached the corner. She stopped. This is me. Julian didn't move. Can I ask you something? She sighed softly. You're going to anyway. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time that night. Why didn't you cry? Her expression stilled. Because crying doesn't change letters like those. He nodded. That's true. A pause. The city filled it for them. Good night, Julian, she said. Good night, Amara. She turned to leave. He watched her go. And then, against every rule he lived by, he called out, Coffee. Tomorrow. If you want. She stopped. Slowly, she turned back. Why? Julian searched for the answer. Found honesty instead. Because I don't want this moment to end like it never mattered. Her lips parted slightly. For a heartbeat, the walls she carried slipped. Fine, she said. But somewhere cheap. I don't do chandeliers. He laughed. Soft, surprised. Deal. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. It was too small, too loud, too human for Julian Cross. He loved it immediately. They talked like people who didn't know they were standing on a fault line. She told him about her work, freelance design, contract jobs, dreams she kept practical so they wouldn't hurt. He told her nothing about his empire. Just that he worked in investments. A half-truth that felt safer. You don't sound like someone who likes it, she said, stirring her coffee. He shrugged. I'm good at it. That's not the same. No, he admitted. It isn't. The hours slipped. Conversation deepened. Laughter came easily. Too easily. When the rain started again, she didn't pull away when he reached for her hand to steady her crossing the street. When he kissed her, it was hesitant, questioning. When she kissed him back, it was with everything she hadn't planned to give. They didn't talk about tomorrow. They didn't talk about consequences. They talked with their bodies instead, with urgency, with curiosity, with a hunger that felt older than reason. Later, wrapped in tangled sheets, Amara rested her head against his chest, listening to a heartbeat that sounded impossibly steady. This doesn't happen to you, she said softly. What? This. Letting go. Julian stared at the ceiling. No. It doesn't. Then don't make it mean something it can't. He turned to her. What if it already does? She didn't answer. Outside, the city kept its secrets. Inside, something irreversible took root. Quiet, unseen, powerful. Neither of them knew that this single night had already rewritten the future. Morning arrived without ceremony. Julian woke first. For a moment, he didn't recognize the ceiling above him. Plain, faintly cracked, nothing like the smooth perfection of his penthouse. The air smelled like detergent and rain-soaked concrete drifting in through a half-open window. Then he felt her. Amara lay curled on her side, her back pressed against his chest, one arm draped over his waist like she belonged there. Her breathing was slow, even, trusting. Something in Julian's chest tightened. He stayed still, afraid that moving would break the fragile reality they'd slipped into. The night replayed in fragments, laughter, heat, the way she'd said his name like it wasn't heavy with expectations. This wasn't supposed to happen. He carefully disentangled himself and sat up. The room was small but neat. Sketches taped to the wall. A folded laptop on a chair. Life lived in inches, not acres. He found his phone on the floor. 23 missed calls. 5 voicemails. All from his father. Reality slammed back into place. Julian dressed quietly, hands unsteady for the first time in years. He left a note on the kitchen counter. I had to step out. Thank you for last night. It felt inadequate, but anything more felt dangerous. When the door closed behind him, the silence returned. Amara woke to absence. She reached behind her instinctively and felt only cool sheets. For a moment, panic flickered, unreasonable, sharp. She pushed it down. Of course he was gone. Men like Julian didn't linger. They borrowed moments and returned to their worlds unchanged. She sat up slowly, a strange heaviness settling in her body. Her stomach rolled unpleasantly. She pressed a hand to her mouth and stood, moving toward the bathroom just in time. When it passed, she leaned against the sink, staring at herself. "Get it together," she whispered. She saw the note then. Her chest tightened, not from heartbreak, but from the foolish relief that he'd left something behind. Proof that she hadn't imagined the connection. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her folder with the rejection letters. Temporary things belonged together. Julian's world did not wait for tenderness. By noon, he was seated across from his father in a private dining room, silverware gleaming between them like weapons. "You were unreachable," his father said calmly. "I was busy," Julian replied. "With what?" Julian met his gaze. "With my life." A dangerous answer. His father set down his glass. "Your life is this family. This company. You don't get to disappear." Julian clenched his jaw. "I didn't disappear. You spent the night outside your routine," his father countered. "That's not an accident." Julian said nothing. "The Ashfords are expecting you this weekend," his father continued. "Their daughter is ideal. Educated. Discreet. She understands what legacy requires." Julian felt something sour rise in his throat. "I'm not a product to be paired," he said quietly. His father leaned back. "You are exactly that." The words landed like a verdict. Days passed. Julian returned to meetings, numbers, controlled efficiency. He told himself the night with Amara was an anomaly, beautiful, human, unsustainable. He didn't call. Amara noticed. She told herself she didn't care, that she hadn't expected anything. Still, when her phone buzzed, her breath caught before logic could intervene. Then her body betrayed her again. The dizziness worsened. The nausea came in waves. A missed cycle stared back at her from the calendar like an accusation. She bought the test with cash. No eye contact. No ceremony. In her bathroom, she sat on the edge of the tub, test in hand, heart pounding too loud. Just stress, she told herself. Just stress. 2 lines appeared anyway. Her breath left her in a rush. "No," she whispered. Then louder. "No, no, no." She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears finally spilling. Not from fear alone, but from the impossible weight of what this meant. A child. A life. From a man who didn't call. Julian found out about the Ashford engagement announcement before it was even finalized. A draft press release crossed his desk. He stared at his own name beside a future he hadn't chosen. That night, he poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. Amara sat alone in her apartment, hands trembling over her stomach, trying to breathe through the reality settling in. Both of them, miles apart, made the same mistake. They tried to pretend the night never happened. They failed. At this point, what should Amara do? Tell him immediately, or protect herself first? And should Julian keep running from the truth, or confront it head-on? Share your thoughts below. The first time Julian heard Amara's name again, it wasn't from her. It was spoken by his assistant in a tone that meant this is unusual. "She's here to see you," the assistant said quietly, standing at the threshold of Julian's office. She didn't have an appointment. Julian's pen froze mid-signature. For a second, the room seemed to tilt. "What did you say?" "Her name is Amara Vale." The air left his lungs slowly. Send her away. That was the reflex. The safe, disciplined response. The one his father would approve of. Instead, Julian heard himself say, "Give us the room." The assistant hesitated, then nodded and closed the door behind her. Amara stood near the window, arms folded tightly across her chest. She looked smaller here, surrounded by glass, steel, and power. but her posture was rigid, defensive. She wore a simple dress, no makeup beyond the bare minimum, curls pulled back with effort that hadn't quite held. She turned when she heard him. Their eyes met. Everything unsaid rushed into the space between them. "Hi," she said. Julian swallowed. "Hi." Silence stretched. "You didn't call," she added, not accusing. "Just stating fact." "I know." "That wasn't a complaint," she said quickly. "I just needed to see you." Julian gestured to the seating area. "Please. Sit." She didn't. He noticed then the faint pallor of her skin, the way one hand remained pressed lightly to her stomach like a reflex she couldn't turn off. "Amara," he said carefully, "is something wrong?" She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "That depends on your definition of wrong." Her voice trembled. Just slightly. Julian moved closer. "Talk to me." She looked up at him, eyes shining with something dangerously close to tears. "I'm pregnant." The words didn't echo. They detonated. Julian felt his world compress to a single point of sound and breath. "What?" "I'm pregnant," she repeated, steadier now, like she'd practiced saying it out loud just to survive the moment. "And before you say anything, no, I didn't come here for money. I didn't even want to come at all. But I thought you should know." His mouth opened, closed. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching. This left him unarmed. "You're sure?" he asked, hating how inadequate that sounded. "Yes." "How long?" She hesitated. "A few weeks." The math struck him like a blow. Julian sat down heavily, running a hand through his hair. This can't be happening." Her shoulders stiffened. "I knew you'd say that." "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. I wasn't prepared." She smiled faintly. "Neither was I." Silence returned, thick and suffocating. "What are you going to do?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "I'm going to have the baby." The certainty in her voice startled him. "You don't want to consider other options?" The words tasted wrong as soon as he said them. Her eyes hardened. "I didn't come here to be talked out of my child." "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," she cut in. "And that's why this is complicated." Julian stood and walked toward the window, staring out at the city he usually controlled with numbers and signatures. "My father cannot know," he said finally. Amara laughed softly, bitter. "There it is." "It's not about shame," he said, turning back. "It's about consequences. If this becomes public." "I don't care about your legacy," she said. "I care about the life growing inside me." Their eyes locked. "I'm not asking you to be a father," she added quietly. "I just needed you to know. That's all." Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't get to decide that alone." That stung. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And you don't get to decide it at all." The tension snapped. A knock interrupted them. Julian's assistant cracked the door open, panic barely hidden. "Mr. Cross, your father is on his way up." He insisted. Amara's breath hitched. Julian closed his eyes briefly, then looked at her. "You need to stay. If he sees you leaving." "No," she said instantly. "I won't be hidden." "Just for now," he urged. "Please." Reluctantly, she nodded. Moments later, the door opened again. Julian's father entered, gaze sharp, assessing, and then it landed on Amara. "Who is this?" he asked coolly. Julian straightened. "This is Amara. She's—" He hesitated. Amara stepped forward before he could finish. "I'm carrying your grandson." The silence that followed was absolute. Julian's father stared at her, then at Julian, then back again. "Leave us," he ordered the assistant. The door closed. 3 people stood in a room built for power, facing a truth no money could erase. Amara's hand rested protectively over her stomach. Julian realized, with terrifying clarity, that running was no longer an option. Should Julian stand up to his father now, or is protecting Amara and the baby quietly the wiser move? What would you do in his place? Julian's father did not raise his voice. That was how Amara knew he was dangerous. He studied her the way one studies an object of uncertain value, quietly, thoroughly, without warmth. His gaze lingered on her posture, her clothes, her hand over her stomach. "You're certain," he said at last. "Not a question. A test." Amara met his eyes. Her voice was calm, but her fingers curled slightly. "Yes." Silence again. Julian shifted beside her. "Father." "Not now," his father said, without looking at him. Then to Amara, "You understand the implications of what you're claiming." "I understand exactly what I'm saying," she replied. "I didn't come for recognition or protection. I came because he deserves to know." His father finally smiled. It was thin, polished. "And now that he does?" Amara hesitated. Just for a moment. "That's up to him," she said. Julian felt something twist painfully in his chest. "You may go," his father said to her. Julian turned sharply. "What?" "I said she may go," his father repeated. "This is a family matter now." Amara looked at Julian, searching his face. For reassurance. For honesty. "I'll call you," Julian said quickly. She nodded, though doubt flickered in her eyes. As she turned to leave, she paused. "For what it's worth," she said to his father, "I was raised by a woman who had nothing but love. And it was enough." Then she walked out. The door closed. Julian exhaled shakily. His father turned to him. "You've been careless." "She's not a mistake," Julian said immediately. His father's eyes hardened. "Everything outside this legacy is a mistake." That was when Julian finally broke. "You never loved her," Julian said quietly. His father stiffened. "My mother," Julian continued. "You never loved her. You married her because it made sense. And she died lonely in a house full of staff." The words hung heavy between them. "Watch your tone," his father warned. "No," Julian said. His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. "I've watched you my entire life. I've done everything you asked. And I won't turn into you." His father stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. "This child," the older man said slowly, "will destroy everything we've built." Julian shook his head. "Or remind us why it mattered." Amara didn't go home. She walked until her legs burned, until the city blurred again into something bearable. She ended up in a small park, sitting on a bench damp with rain, breathing through the ache in her chest. She felt foolish. Exposed. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered anyway. "Hello." "Amara," Julian said. "Please don't hang up." She closed her eyes. "I'm listening." "I should have stood up for you better," he said. I froze. "I'm sorry." Her voice softened despite herself. "That room wasn't built for people like me." "It shouldn't be built against you," he replied. She said nothing. "Can I see you?" he asked. "Not as damage control. As myself." She hesitated. "Julian, I can't be pulled into your war." "I know," he said. "That's why I want to tell you something." She waited. "My mother lost herself," he said quietly. "She gave up everything for a name that never held her. I promised myself I'd never live that way. But somewhere along the line, I forgot how to choose differently." Amara swallowed. "I don't want to repeat that story," he added. "For you. Or for the baby." Her hand tightened over her stomach. "Meet me," she said finally. "But not at your office. Somewhere real." They met at a small coastal town 2 hours away, neutral ground neither of them owned. The air smelled like salt and freedom. Julian wore jeans. Amara noticed. They walked along the shore, shoes in hand, waves brushing their feet. "This is where my mother brought me once," Amara said. "When I was 8. She told me the ocean was proof that some things can't be controlled." Julian smiled faintly. "My father hates the ocean." They laughed. A release. She told him about her childhood, about nights without power, about watching her mother choose kindness over bitterness, about learning strength without cruelty. He told her about about tutors and silence, about earning praise instead of affection, about a house that echoed. They sat on the sand as the sun dipped low. "I don't know what this makes us," Amara said. "Neither do I," Julian admitted. "But I know what I don't want." She looked at him. "I don't want to disappear," he said. "And I don't want you to feel like you have to fight alone." Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but something gentler. Hope, perhaps. Or its dangerous cousin. For the first time, they touched not out of urgency, but understanding. Still, the shadow of his father loomed. And neither of them knew how high the cost of love would climb. The weeks that followed their seaside meeting were quiet in ways that felt almost dangerous. Julian kept a careful distance from the life his father demanded, carving out small pockets of time with Amara that were just theirs. No business calls, no power lunches, no boardroom glances, just conversations, laughter, and the growing rhythm of something neither of them had expected. Amara had transformed Julian's apartment without even meaning to. Her influence was subtle, a handmade blanket draped over his leather sofa, a small plant that needed watering daily, sketches pinned to the wall. Each detail reminded him of a world beyond control, beyond legacy, where vulnerability was not weakness. They settled into routines, Julian making strong coffee for 2 every morning, Amara teaching him how to cook simple meals without burning the kitchen down. "You're hopeless," she teased one morning, laughing as he almost set the eggs on fire again. "I know," he replied, smiling faintly. "You're supposed to fix that." "I'm not fixing anything," she said, shaking her head. "I'm just here." That word, here, became sacred. Presence, honesty, trust, things Julian had never learned in a house ruled by expectation. One night, as rain tapped lightly against the windows, Amara rested her head against his chest. He traced lazy patterns on her back, feeling the soft swell of her belly beneath his hand. "I never thought I'd want this," Julian admitted quietly. "This?" she asked, eyes half closed. "This," he said, lifting his gaze to hers. "Family. Safety. You." Her lips curved faintly, vulnerability mixing with joy. "You make it sound like I didn't already have to fight for every ounce of it." "You don't fight alone anymore," he whispered. There was laughter, yes, but also moments of silence that spoke louder than words. They learned each other's fears, hopes, and quirks. Julian discovered Amara's love for night markets, the way she hummed under her breath while drawing, how she preferred cold showers in the morning because it woke her senses. Amara discovered Julian's restless generosity, the way he softened when children were around, the rare flashes of tenderness he reserved only for those who mattered. They built small traditions. Sunday mornings were pancakes and story time, even if the story was made up. He'd read her favorite childhood books aloud, intentionally mispronouncing words to make her laugh. She decorated the apartment during holidays in ways that made the sterile space warm and human. Yet, even in these moments, reality lingered. Julian's father waited patiently, like a shadow behind every smile. Their forced proximity, the secret of their child, the stakes of Julian's empire, these were threads they couldn't ignore. And then one evening, as the golden sunset poured across the room, Julian looked at Amara and asked softly, "Do you trust me?" Amara paused, the question slicing through the comfort they had built. She had to choose vulnerability again. "With everything," she said finally. Julian held her tighter. The weight of fear, expectation, and secrecy felt momentarily lighter. Together, they allowed themselves to believe that love, unplanned, uninvited, unstoppable, could exist even in the midst of chaos. For the first time since their meeting, Both of them felt a taste of hope that wasn't fleeting. But as the night deepened, so did the unspoken truth. Their happiness, fragile as it was, would soon be tested. If you were in Amara or Julian's place, would you risk everything for love, knowing the world is ready to tear it apart? Comment your thoughts below. It happened on a Tuesday, a day ordinary in every sense, yet destined to fracture everything. Julian had returned from the office later than usual. His father had summoned him unexpectedly to finalize a new acquisition. The tension in the elevator had been suffocating, the words unsaid pressing against Julian's chest like a vice. By the time he entered the apartment, the faint scent of jasmine, Amara's favorite candle, welcomed him. He exhaled, anticipating the calm he'd grown accustomed to in her presence. But calm wasn't what he found. Amara stood near the window, shoulders tense, phone clutched tightly in one hand. Her other hand rested protectively on her belly. Julian noticed immediately. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her eyes darker than usual. "Amara?" he asked cautiously. She didn't turn immediately. "Julian, we need to talk." The words themselves carried the weight of inevitability. He closed the distance between them. "What happened?" She finally met his gaze. "Your father. He called me today." Julian froze. "Called you? Why?" "To threaten me," she said, voice low, trembling. "He knows everything. He said if I ever went public, he would ruin me. And you." Julian's heart dropped. The threat wasn't new, but the audacity shook him. He wanted to call his father, to confront him, to scream. Anything, but Amara raised her hand. "Don't," she warned. "I can't let him drag you into this. He's powerful, Julian. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want you to worry." His jaw tightened. "Not telling me. Amara, we're in this together. We need trust, not silence." "I know," she whispered. "But I was scared. For you, for us, for the baby." Julian stepped closer, frustration boiling into his chest. "You think I can't handle fear? You think I'm not terrified too?" Tears sprang into her eyes. "You don't understand. I do. I've never wanted anything more in my life than this, than you. And I can't fix it if you hide from me." She shook her head. "It's not about fixing. He's bigger than us. Everything we've built can be gone in an instant." Silence fell heavy between them. The rain began tapping against the window like impatient fingers. Julian tried again, softer this time. "I'll fight him, Amara. For you, for our child. But you need to let me in. You can't do this alone." Her face crumpled. "I've been doing it alone all my life, Julian. I don't know how to rely on anyone." "Then let me teach you," he pleaded. But just as he reached out, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, and her hand flew to her mouth. A message from an unknown number. "He knows. Be careful." The room seemed to shrink. Julian's pulse thundered in his ears. Amara's eyes met his, wide, panicked, vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. We can't do this like this," she whispered. Maybe we should stop before it's too late." Julian felt as if the floor had been ripped from under him. All the laughter, the intimacy, the hope, they were suddenly threatened by fear, power, and secrets. "Stop," he repeated, his voice hollow. "After everything we've been through?" "Yes," she said, voice breaking. "Before we get hurt more than we already are." Her words were a dagger to his heart. He reached for her, but she turned, retreating toward the door. "Amara," he called, but she didn't look back. The door closed. The sound echoed in the apartment, final and devastating. Julian sank onto the sofa, head in hands. The ache of loss, fear, and helplessness pressed down on him. He had never felt this powerless in his life. Outside, the rain continued to fall. It washed the city streets clean, indifferent. Inside, two hearts shattered under the weight of love, fear, and circumstance. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved to protect them? What would you do in Julian and Amara's place? Comment your thoughts below. The days that followed were unbearable. Julian woke each morning to silence where Amara's laughter used to fill the apartment. Her side of the bed remained cold, the small handmade blanket draped over his sofa untouched. He couldn't focus at work, every deal, every conversation with his father felt meaningless without her. He tried calling. No answer. Texts went ignored. Emails remained unopened. Each ping of his phone that wasn't from her made his chest tighten. Amara, meanwhile, moved through her own life like a ghost. She threw herself into work, sketches, errands, anything to keep her mind off Julian. Yet, every evening, when the city lights blurred against her window, she thought of him. She thought of his touch, the way he made her feel seen, and her stomach tightened at the memory of their child, growing without its father's embrace. One evening, Julian stood at the edge of the riverwalk, the city glittering behind him. He had called everyone he knew for advice, strategized endlessly, and yet nothing prepared him for this. The distance between him and Amara, a chasm he had created with his own inaction. He pulled out his phone, fingers trembling, and typed, "Amara, I'm done pretending I can't be scared. I'm done pretending I can't be vulnerable. I want you. I want our child. I want us. Please. Can we meet?" He hit send before fear could stop him. Hours passed. The city around him blurred. Then finally, a reply. "Meet me at the pier. 7 p.m. Julian's chest surged with hope and fear in equal measure. The pier had been neutral ground once before, a place where honesty had started to bloom between them. Amara arrived first, coat wrapped tightly, hair windswept, eyes cautious. She looked small against the vast expanse of water, and Julian's heart ached. "Hi," he said softly. She nodded, words failing. He took a deep breath. "I made mistakes. I froze when I should have acted. I let fear rule me instead of love. And I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you, or our child, because of my pride." Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "You don't know how long I've been holding myself together," she whispered. "Trying not to hope. Trying not to need you." Julian stepped closer. "You don't have to do it alone anymore. I want to fight for us. For our family. For love." She studied him, searching for the truth in his eyes. Then, finally, she allowed herself to believe. I'm scared," she admitted. "I am too," he said. "But we can be scared together. That's how we survive." She took a tentative step forward. "Together." "Together," he confirmed, reaching out his hand. She placed her hand in his, trembling, and a weight neither of them had realized they carried lifted just slightly. For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the wind tugging at their hair, the waves murmuring below. The choice had been made, not by circumstance, not by fear, but by the courage to step into vulnerability. Julian lowered his forehead to hers. "We'll figure out your father, the press, the world, but we do it as us. As a family." Amara nodded, tears spilling freely now. "As a family," she repeated. And in that moment, the city's lights, the pier, the river, even the distant hum of life, all of it seemed to cheer them on. They were no longer running. They were choosing. When it comes to love, would you choose safety or risk everything for what truly matters? How far would you go to protect a family? Share your answer below. The morning sunlight spilled across Julian's penthouse, warm and golden, carrying the promise of a new beginning. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the city that had once felt like a cage. Amara entered quietly, barefoot, carrying a small bag of groceries and a sketchbook tucked under her arm. She moved with the ease of someone who had finally allowed herself to breathe fully, and Julian felt his chest loosen at the sight of her. "Good morning," she said softly, placing the groceries on the counter. "Good morning," he replied, his voice steady, certain. They didn't rush into words. There was a calm understanding between them, the kind forged in trials, tears, and hard-earned trust. Julian stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as he reached for the coffee cup she had just poured. "How's our little one doing?" Amara smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made Julian's heart skip. "Sleeping. Hopefully as peaceful as we are now." He chuckled softly. "I'm determined to make sure it stays that way." There was a knock on the door. Both of them froze. Julian's father entered, expression unreadable. He stopped, looking at Amara. His voice faltered, a rare crack in his armor. "I underestimated you." Amara held his gaze, unwavering. "You underestimated love." Julian's father exhaled and finally smiled faintly. "I see now. You've both made choices I would not have imagined. And yet, perhaps they are the right ones." It was the first time Julian saw his father without judgment, without the shadow of legacy looming over every word. Later that day, they walked along the riverfront, hand in hand. Julian adjusted the scarf around Amara's neck and kissed her temple gently. "I never thought life could feel like this," he admitted. "Peaceful, grounded, real." Amara laughed, the sound bright and melodic. "It's amazing what happens when people finally stop running." Julian stopped, looking into her eyes. "We chose each other. And now we protect what matters, our family, our child, our love." Amara placed a hand on her stomach. "And nothing else will matter more." They stood there for a long while, watching the river reflect the golden sunset. Every challenge, every fear, every sleepless night and whispered worry had led them to this. Months later, the city celebrated a new life. Julian and Amara's child arrived, healthy and full of promise. The legacy that had once defined Julian's existence now paled in comparison to the small fingers wrapped around his own. He whispered softly to the baby, "Welcome to a world where love always wins." Amara rested her head against Julian's shoulder, smiling through tears. "We did it," she whispered. "Yes," Julian replied. "Together." Outside, the city moved on as always. But inside, 3 hearts beat in unison, each one fortified by the choice to fight, to trust, and to love without compromise. Do you believe love can truly overcome legacy, fear, and expectation? What would you risk for the family you choose? Comment below and share your story. The river reflected the sunset, just as life reflected their choice, a love born in adversity, tested by fear, and ultimately victorious.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed the story and want to experience more touching tales, don't forget to subscribe to Echoes of a Touching Tale for more videos. Your support means a lot and helps keep these stories alive.